A very good morning on behalf of India FinTech Forum. I am Aditya Rajkothari and I have Mr. Manish Thakwani, the head of business development in India and South Asia of JuicyScore, who is a specialist in fraud and risk management. A very warm welcome to FinTech Leadership Series.
Glad to be here.
JuicyScore, a global leader in anti-fraud and risk management solutions, has expanded their operations in the Indian subcontinent in 2021. They have over 100 plus clients across 28 different countries with headquarters in Singapore and Dubai. How has the growth in India been? What are the new opportunities that India as a market possess?
Yeah, so I'd like to just give everyone a background about ourselves first, right? So first of all, why do we call ourselves Juicy Score, right? So everyone I speak to, they ask me this question, why this name, right? A lot of people confuse it with a brand which is known as Juicy Couture, which is a women's brand, fashion brand, right? But it's not the same, right? So the background behind that is that there are two elements of our product, right? One is score and the other is juicy. And why we call it score is because there is a fraud score, as you rightly said, which we provide to our customer, or not exactly a fraud score, but an anti-fraud score, which we provide to our customer, which they can use to understand how risky a particular transaction or a particular application could be before they sort of complete that. And that's the reason for calling it score. And why we'll call it juicy is because the information which we analyze is something which is uh, completely non-personal information of the customer, especially right now when you know that the regulations are so strict, and especially in the fintech space, there are so many regulations which have come in the last 3 to 6 months only, right? So the information which we use is completely non-PII, and we believe in squeezing juice out of this information, and that's the reason for calling it juicy. And we combine that, we call it juicy score. Now, coming back to the main question, so as far as the growth story is being concerned, I think the growth has been steady as well as phenomenal because, I'll give you an example. When we first started in the market, people used to ask us that, why, if you don't even take PI, what can you do? I mean, how can we sort of lend to anyone or maybe let the transaction get completed if you don't have the personal information? But, now people are realizing that you can be as non-intrusive as possible with the customer, still can understand the risk involved in a particular application or a transaction. Although, obviously, if you have to lend, like you're a fintech in the lending space, you have to know the customer, right? You have to know who you're lending to. But I mean, still you can use a lot of alternate data, which is on the non-PIA side, which we are able to provide to our customers, which they can use to understand risk in those applications and the transactions which happen, right? So yeah, I mean the growth has been steady, and then we are actually at this particular juncture working with four major NBFC companies in India at this particular moment, right? Who are into digital lending, as well as we are doing pilots with a lot of companies who are in a digital neo banking space, right? You know that banking has also gone online, where there are no branches and also all those things. So all these parameters which we're able to provide to them is very very valuable to them as well in decision making. Right? So yeah, it's been great, the experience so
Right.
far, right?
Great to hear that. Juicy Score has its presence across the globe. How does it deal with regulatory changes in every country? Do you have any suggestion to make out regulators to smoothen out protocols in India?
See, that's a pretty interesting question. Like when we talk about regulations, right? So it's a very broad term, right? And a lot of people actually, there are two set of people which I've seen. Like when I say people, I mean the customers or the prospects I deal with almost daily. One who are very cautious about it, they want to be on the right side of regulations, and they do not actually want to cross that boundary. And then there is one segment which is sort of doing anything and everything which they want to, be it on the right side of regulation, be it on the wrong side, or be it on the gray side, because there are a lot of, because even RBI, which comes up with a lot of regulations, there are a lot of gray areas which are there. A lot of people sort of use that to their advantage and try to do their business, right? But I believe that that's not the right way to go about it. And if you see the companies whom we are working with, or almost in the process of going live with, they believe to be on the right side of regulation at the day one, right? All the data which they use, all the information which they analyze, and the customer information which they take, and all those things are on the right side of regulation. They do not cross that boundary of collecting all that information which they do not need, right? I'll give you an example. If you maybe download an app right now, I'm not going to take any name of any company, But if you download any generic app right now, it'll ask you for 100 different sort of permissions, right? Your contact, your call logs, your SMS, your, I don't know what all data you have on your phone, right? So we believe in not doing that. And in fact, the information which we use is does not even reach that particular stage, because the information which we are analyzing is more around the behavior, anonymous behavior of the customer, be it the device information, which I talked about, because our solution is something which focuses on the customer device, where we pick up a lot of information from that, which is completely non-PII. The device software data to the extent which we can go to, right? But not exactly looking at what exact apps is the customer using, because that again gets into the non-PI, into the PII stage and all those things. And also network data, which is also anonymous, right? So we use all of this information and come up with meaningful insights for lenders, digital lenders specifically, banks and other financial institutions, where they can use this information and understand what the transaction could be and what application could be in terms of risk. And as I said, you know, since day one, our approach has been to be on the right side of regulation, and our customer segment also, whom we sort of work with, believe have the same belief. And you would see that at this particular moment, if you look at the fintech space now, fintech actually has exploded in India, right? Since 2016, it's been like billions of dollars in investment which have been made. So that's one of the highly invested industry in India. Like if you see 21, 22 combined, there have been more than until August 2022, which I remember, more than $10 billion have been invested in the industry, right? So in
Right.
this industry, basically what happens is that obviously you have to acquire customers very quickly as well. You do not have time. But in this action, what happens is that a lot of customers sort of get into a stage of collecting information, which is intrusive to the end customer, which we do not believe in. Right. So the idea is to be on the right side of regulation and also sort of provide meaningful insights to our customers, where they can, you know, basically do their business as well and be on the right side of regulation.
Right. How is JuicyScore combating fraud in the era of digital payments, where there are diversified entry points for fraudsters, vulnerability
Yeah.
in the payments technology, unsecured remote access, and identity theft? What security measures does JuicyScore takes to protect its consumers' data?
Yeah. So see, as I just mentioned about specifically the example of fintech space, right? Now, in fintech, you can have digital lenders, you can have payment providers, payment aggregators, even e-commerce. I would sort of combine here, because e-commerce is sort of, these payment providers are enablers for e-commerce transactions to be sort of fulfilled. So you think of any business. So all of these businesses are digital, right? So our objective is that we provide all these insights in sort of DIY, mostly in DIY journeys, where the customer has all sort of control. Where, let's just say, I give an example: the customer downloads the BNPL app, he logs into his app, he enters his mobile number, there's an OTP which comes through. He's logged into the app and he understands, okay, this BNPL provider has given me a 20,000 rupees sort of limit, and I can spend it anywhere I want to buy a product, or maybe complete a transaction, buy a train ticket, or book a flight, or whatever, right? But how does this thing happen, right? So the lender has seconds to underwrite this particular individual or application which is coming through, right? Of course, they are using a lot of other channels as well, where they're maybe doing some sort of verification of the customer PI as well. But how we do it is that essentially our focus is on the customer device from where this request is coming in, right? We provide the customers an SDK which they can integrate with their app, which will collect this data which I just talked about. And we also have another way where we integrate our script on the um, browser page where the customer is landing up, right, to log in and all those things. So that's where the information from the device is picked up. And we analyze that particular information, and a lot of factors we come up with, which can be understood by the particular customer in seconds, right? Now, this information largely is around, there is the same device being used multiple times, because we build the device ID, which is very pretty static, where we do not use any Google IDs or Apple IDs to identify that, because those things can be changed, right? But if there is a fraudster, he may be using the same device for different multiple identities, right? With different identity, you may see that He may be using my identity, your identity, or Vinny's or somebody else's identity to basically do a subsequent transaction or get his application approved. But the device will still remain the same, right? So that's one thing which we look at, and a lot of finer parameters around behavioral, or how is he behaving when he's coming onto a particular page, right? I'll give you an example of a typical digital lending scenario where let's just say you want a loan, you go to a particular lender's website, you apply, you enter certain details, but when a fraudster would be coming onto this particular page, there will be certain way he'll be behaving. He'll be much faster as compared to you because he knows all the details on where they have to be filled and how they have to be filled. He basically would be copy pasting a lot of information. As an example, like, he, because he's not even aware of whose identity is he using, he just has the details if he's using them to apply for a loan. So those things would be there. And basically other things would be that when it comes to reading terms and conditions, major pointers around the financial product which he's purchasing, he will not even look at that because he's not interested, because he just wants the loan, and then he may not come back again, right? He just scoot after taking that money, right? So those are some examples, and we try to look at in totality around behavior, and we try to see which kind of behavior is it. Is it too risky, or is it okay, or is it on the righter side of things? So we can sort of go ahead with that particular application. That's more around behavior. And then there are other examples on network or other parameters like you talked about, like somebody's using a remote access, or somebody's basically using some sort of script injections or some sort of technology manipulations to sort of fool the person at the other side, right? So those things also we try to sort of look at. IP address as well, we try to look at. Location and other aspects are also part of our input, right? So we try to come up with meaningful insights which the lender can understand. In fact, we also have an income estimation parameter, but that's more not focusing on fraud, but that's more around credit risk, which you think of, like, if the lender wants to understand, or any financial service provider want to understand how much worthy this guy is enough for, maybe taking that loan. Usually people would use a bureau score or something of that sort, but our score is more of independent around device and location and network and other details which I just talked
Yeah.
about, which can be used as a pseudo bureau sort of score, right, for understanding which income segment which the customer will be falling into. So what happens then in totality when a financial services provider looks at this information, he has an understanding of possible high risk around fraud, some parameters around credit risk as well. So they can use a solution at a very early stage, right? At the very lead level stage, even before the KYC has happened of the customer, even before a sort of bureau ping has happened. Some even use it in conjunction with bureau, but some even use it before that. So we can also help in filtering all these applications, which could be junk at the
Right.
end, and eventually could be turning fraudulent, or maybe turning delinquent if I speak a lender's language, right? So that is also a thing where we help in, right? So it's a total sort of a solution. But yes, I always recommend to my customers and prospects and whomever I speak with that our solution cannot replace your existing check. It's more of something which is a complementing solution, because they are doing bureau, they are doing KYC, they are doing multiple other checks to, obviously they are doing it for the purpose, right? Because they want to
Right.
understand the risk, understand the fraud, understand the credit risk and all those things. Our solution would add another sort of angle to it, where their existing, I would say, approval rate can be improved, and also their bad rate can be improved. In obviously reduction, approval rate would be increased and bad rate would be reduced, right? So that's how we sort of help our customers
That's quite
globally.
interesting to hear. Right. What advice would you like to give to the youth for the fraud prevention in India?
Okay, so that's a pretty interesting question, because when we talk about fraud prevention, it's one aspect of the risk management space, right, which we sort of deal with. So I'll maybe give you an example by talking about myself. So I have almost spent sort of a decade in this industry. So let's just say I do understand how this space works. And my advice to the youth largely would be that, if you think of it and you are young yourself, so a lot of youth is actually using a lot of digital technologies and everything. Like you have Swiggy's of the world, you have Zomato's, you have simple lazy pay to make payments. All those things are available in the market. But the youth has to be, although they're on the right side of digital things, but they have to understand the risk as well, right? I'll give you a basic example. Like, let's just say they're visiting a particular website to do a certain transaction. They should do basic things like checking whether the website is secured or not, right? And those are basic things to check because specifically when the UPI and things has basically made transaction everything so easy. So digital technology is something which is a double-edged sword, right? It benefits you, but it can harm you as well if you don't use it in the correct way, right? So
Right.
that's one thing which they should do. And then, of course, you must have heard about a lot of scams which are happening in India. If I just take an example, that you get an SMS saying that your bank account has is closed because your KYC is not done. Your basically that fast tag is going to expire. Your
Right.
Paytm wallet is going to be this thing. So you get a lot of SMSs which are mostly phishing messages, right? Basically, the objective is to sort of defraud you, right? So you should be aware of all those things, and there should be just one sort of I would say baseline they should have, that nothing comes for free in this world. If somebody is giving you something for free, just have that suspicious mindset of this thing for questioning. How can you give me something for free, right? So there obviously can be something bad which could
Right.
be obviously there could be genuine scenarios as well, but yeah, you should always be cautious and should have a questioning attitude about these things, especially in a digital world where you do not know who you're talking to at the end. You do not know who you're receiving messages from or calls from on the other side. So
Right. You're a working professional with over 12 years of experience in telecom and BFSI sector with various roles and responsibilities. What advice for the young graduates you have, those who are looking out for jobs?
okay, so that question is more around fraud prevention or generally you're talking about.
Generally.
Okay, so I think give you my example of myself and then try to answer this question, right? So as you rightly said, so I've almost have a decade of experience now, more than a decade now. So I started off, I mean, almost said it's, I mean, like when I was graduating, so anyone and everyone was doing engineering, right? So I ended up in the same boat, did my engineering, right? And then when I finished my engineering, I had no idea what I had to do, right? I just followed the path by joining a tech company as a software engineer, which every sort of engineer does in the IT world, right? So that was my first job. And slowly and steadily, I moved on into within the tech space. I realized, that I wanted to be doing something, although on the tech side of things, but more of around a customer facing role where I'm talking to someone, I know what I'm doing, and I'm able to see that value which I'm providing, right? It's tangible, it's visible to me, right? So, and slowly and steadily, I realized that that is what I something which I wanted to do, but also use technology along with it because technology is something where obviously I've majored in and I have a passion for technology. So that's I sort of combine those things, and of course, risk management is something which I entered at a very early stage. So that's something which I obviously made my career out of, and then slowly and slowly grown into basically a tech sales role, in specific in the risk space. But the important thing here is that the sooner you realize what you want to do, the better it is. Because if, like for example, for me, I realized maybe after doing my graduation, and then sort of I realized what I want to do. If you find this thing at a very early stage in your career, even before, let's just say you're doing your plus two, your even your 10th standard or whatever, right? If you realize those things at a very early stage, then things are very easier for you, right? So then you can put in all the effort and then you see your desired result. But even if there's nothing bad in realizing it later, but it's just that you should realize it as soon as possible so that you put your 100% effort in something which you know your passion is, and then what you are basically be obviously going to be making your bread butter out of, right? That's very important to do. That's the advice which I have to the youth, at least for for as a for a career objective, if I may say so.
Right. I thank Mr. Manish Thakwani, the Head of Business Development in India and South Asia of JuicyScore, to share his valuable insights on fraud risk management and his professional journey. Have a great weekend ahead, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure.